The NBA draft is never fluid when it comes to the consensus around prospects from the start of the cycle to the end of the cycle, and that's always what makes it interesting. We see guys move up the board throughout the year, and guys move down the board throughout the year, and it's why the first ever mock draft before the college season starts never ends up being the one that ends up being accurate in the end. Look at Ja Morant, for example. He was projected to be a top 10 pick in the draft by, I would say, most outlets at the beginning of his sophomore year at Murray State, but by the end of the year, he was the consensus number 2 player on most people's boards. Another example in the opposite direction would be Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson was a player that many thought could be a top 10 lock in this class. When he was going in 2021, he was going to be this big all-around wing at Duke. He was somebody that got a lot of hype as high as number 3. In fact, I think going into that cycle, he was my number 3 player in that draft. But by the end of the cycle, he fell out of the lottery and ended up going 20th overall. I will say I had a top 10 grade on Jalen Johnson still, but the public consensus was lower than it was at the start of the year. And I do think this is something that's interesting when it comes to Scoot Henderson. Obviously, I don't think it's as sort of drastic as it was with Ja or Jalen Johnson, because the consensus around Scoot is still very much that he could be a top 2 guy and somebody that probably won't fall past that 3rd pick, but he started the year as like the easy number 2, and some thought that he could go for that number 1 spot until we saw what Victor Wembanyama was fully unleashed. And now there are people that think that he might not go top 2, or he's a top 2 player in the draft. And to be honest with you, I don't really understand it, because Scoot Henderson really didn't show anything that suggests that he should be lower than number 2 in the draft based off the tape that I've seen this year. And yeah, we have seen a rise in Brandon Miller. He's somebody that fits the category of raising his draft stock from the beginning of the cycle to where we are now, and likely at the end of the cycle. He went from like a fringe lottery prospect to somebody that is legitimately like a top 3 to 4 lock in my opinion. But even with that, I don't think it changes much of anything when it comes to Scoot Henderson. I don't really think it's a debate between Scoot and Miller, and I've talked about it multiple times in other videos. It's nothing against Brandon Miller by any stretch of the imagination. Brandon Miller is a great prospect in his own right. I made an 18-minute video talking about him and why I think that he's one of the most high-floor prospects in the class, and why he also has a pretty decent ceiling. How that combination makes him one of the safer bets in the top 3 to 4 picks. And even though I think other guys have a bit more upside, I would take Brandon Miller over them because of the fact that you know what you're going to get at the very least, and you can still get a great player at his potential peak. But compared to Scoot Henderson, it really isn't close, because Scoot Henderson is a transcendent prospect. I don't think that's changed. He's somebody that can change the fortunes of a franchise. He would be the number 1 pick in most drafts. In fact, I would say he would have gotten number 1 last year, and I loved Paolo Banchero as a prospect as well. But Scoot is just that special. When you look at the body of work that Scoot Henderson has, it's hard to say that he should fall past pick 2, in my opinion. He's just that good. What he's been able to do in the G League since he was 17 years old is rare. I talked about it in my breakdown video, scouting report, whatever you want to call it, about Scoot Henderson, but he's the only other prospect that I've seen do something similar to Luka Doncic, who's the best prospect I've ever evaluated, in a sense of being able to adjust to playing against pro competition at a super young age. And I think that's something that people are overlooking. I do think there are concerns with the numbers with Scoot Henderson. Yes, his 3-point shooting isn't the greatest. Yes, overall his numbers haven't gotten too much better in G League Ignite from his first year with the program to this season. But at the same time, I don't think people understand just how special Scoot Henderson was last season when he wasn't the main option. So, if anything, all this tells me is that Scoot Henderson couldn't improve at all, and I don't even think that's true. I think he definitely has improved, but the idea that he couldn't improve at all and still is this good tells me he's still the number 2 in this class. And again, I don't think it's true that he hasn't improved. Sure, again, the numbers aren't great. He hasn't really improved as a 3-point shooter, but on tape, he's improved as a passer. I think he always has some primary creation traits, and he showed that even more this season. I do think he's still a really good mid-range shooter. He's one of the most athletic players in this draft and will be one of the most athletic guards in the league the moment he steps on an NBA court. He's still proving that he's better than a lot of guys that are significantly older than him in the G League, and he's one of the most NBA-ready prospects in recent memory. And again, I do understand how it comes off as me not thinking that Brandon Miller is that good when I say these things about Scoot to basically show my belief that it's not even a debate between them as a prospect. I get that completely, but at the same time, I look at it and say, this has nothing to do with how good I think Brandon Miller is or how bad I think Brandon Miller is, because he's not a bad prospect. He's actually a great prospect, and he is worthy of going top 3 in this draft. But I think people are starting to undersell and underrate what Scoot Henderson is as a prospect. I know people use his height against him. He's only 6'2". One, I don't think 6'2" is that short compared to what we see in guards in the league. Steph Curry is 6'2". Damian Lillard is listed at 6'2". He's actually closer to 6 feet tall. Donovan Mitchell is 6'1". Darius Garland is 6'1", and he might be just 6 feet tall, and that height might be a bit less accurate than people think. So I just think that him being 6'2", a legit 6'2", mind you, really shouldn't be used against him the way it is, when one, he's proven at a super young age that he can be a high-level player against competition much older than him while being 6'2". And secondly, I look at it and say, we just saw 2 guys that are like 6'1" at the most put up 70 points in games, 71 to be exact. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Yes, he is shorter, but his wingspan is pretty good. He has like a 6'8" wingspan. And he's shown that he can play bigger than his 6'2" height and be effective. I don't think that saying, oh, he shouldn't be number 2 in this class just because he's 6'2" is a valid reason, especially when we saw this quote-unquote undersized guard finish at the rim with Victor Wembanyama in the paint, who's 7'5" with an 8-foot wingspan and ways we have never seen anyone else finish at the rim. He was consistently doing things at the rim against Victor Wembanyama that no other player we've seen Victor face off against do at the guard spot. And that to me negates all sort of concerns about the fact that he's maybe not 6'4" per se. He's a special prospect, and the fact that he does it at 6'2" makes it even more impressive in my opinion. It's not like he struggles to finish at the basket. It's not like he struggles to deal with physicality. In fact, most players struggle to deal with his physicality as a player. And to me, that's what makes him a special prospect and easily number 2 on my board. And I know people will bring up the games where he struggled from the field this year in the G League. And yes, he does have games where he struggled in the G League from the field. But there's also a lot of games where he played really well, and so that's why he's one of those special guard prospects. Arguably the best guard prospect of the last 10 years. So I just don't understand why that's being used against him when we can do this with every prospect. We can all pull up bad games from the field from prospects. They're prospects at the end of the day. No prospect is perfect. Every prospect has games where they struggle from the field or maybe look a little bit lost. They all have it. Brandon Miller has it. Victor Wembanyama has it. The Thompson twins have it. Kassan Wallace has it. Cam Whitmore. A bunch of guys have it. Even historically, we've seen it. The only one I look at and say they really don't have like any games where they struggle from the field was Zion Williamson. And Zion Williamson is one of 3 prospects that I would say is better than Scoot. Like, it's him, Luka, and Wemby. Like, those are the 3 that I think are better than Scoot. Like, nobody else, I think, compares when it comes to prospect grade and evaluation to Scoot. He's number 4 when it comes to the best prospects I've ever evaluated since 2016. And I still think that it's a really good example to use as a case for why Scoot isn't number 2. And I've watched a lot of prospects throughout the years, a lot of good ones throughout the years that have gone to become great NBA players. And not many of them compare to Scoot as a prospect in terms of what he brings to the table. He has a combination of athletic tools, traits, feel for the game, and skills as a basketball player that are rare. You don't find these things often, if at all. He's somebody as an athlete that you look at and realize he doesn't have a flaw in this area. He's somebody that is NBA ready from a strength perspective. In fact, I would say defenders actually struggle to deal with his physicality more than he struggles to deal with physicality. He is just extremely strong for his age, especially as a point guard. Secondly, you look at the body control. It's not just the fact that he's strong. He has really good body control and balance and incredible flexibility for somebody that big at the point guard spot. And you'll get vertical athleticism. Obviously, he's a high-flying athlete that can jump out of the gym. And it's just a combination where you look at it and say, okay, the strength, the speed, the quickness, the flexibility, the body control, his ability to jump out of the gym, like, it's all at the very least at an elite level. Like, everything is elite when it comes to his athleticism. I don't think he's the best athlete in this class. I actually think Amen Thompson is the best athlete in this class, but that's just because Amen has physical traits that I don't think really anyone else has. And to me, that separates him because of the upside with his physical traits are a bit higher than Scoot's, but Scoot is a more complete athlete. I would say Scoot is the most complete athlete in this class, even if I don't think he's the best athlete in this class. I think Amen's a little bit better as an athlete, just based off his traits being a bit higher than Scoot. But Scoot is easily one of the best point guards in terms of pure athleticism we've ever seen, and it will translate to the NBA immediately. And then you combine that with his skill as a player. Really good handle. He can create his own shot. He can attack the basket. He's a really good finisher. He's better at drawing contact than his numbers may suggest. Really good passer. Incredible feel for the game, and has an ability to control a game, in my opinion. Somebody that is a great mid-range shooter. He's not a good three-point shooter, I will admit that, but mid-range, he is money from that area. And he does have a lot of positive indicators as far as his three-point shooting goes. He's a good free throw shooter, has good shooting touch from the mid-range obviously, but also on things like floaters. His floater game is incredible, and his layup ability is really good as well in terms of touch around the basket. And I also think he does have deep shooting range, but it's about getting the consistency down right now. I do think that there are too many positive indicators with Scoot Henderson as an overall shooter, especially the results from the mid-range area and his ability to create off the dribble in the mid-range area as a shooter and from close range as a shooter, to say that he is a bad shooter and that he can't shoot. But the three-point shooting does need work. I will admit that. But I do think there are positive indicators there. I just think that you look at what he does, and he has all the traits to be a superstar. And somebody that could easily be the best player on a contender one day. He has that kind of potential. And I don't say that lightly. That's not something I throw on players as an expectation. Now, I don't think it's fair to say that he has to reach those expectations, but he does have the potential to be that kind of player. And you look at all the great players in the league, they have those same traits that Scoot Henderson has as a player. And to me, that's what makes him the number 2 guy in this class. Because there are only 3 players in this class, in my opinion, that have legit franchise player potential. Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and Amen Thompson. Victor Wembanyama is obviously 1-1. And he is the one that obviously will be at the top of the list in terms of franchise player potential. He's an absolute alien as a basketball player, one of the best prospects ever. The only prospect I think is better than Victor is Luka, and that's because Luka showed legit all NBA traits at an age where Victor still was kind of developing, and I think that the floor with Luka was a bit higher than with Victor, but Victor is the highest ceiling prospect ever, in my opinion, and he obviously has the most franchise player potential. I think he has potential to be the best player in the world. He's that good. But outside of Victor, I look at it and say that Scoot has the highest floor among the other 2 guys that have that franchise player potential. And in fact, I would say Scoot has one of the higher floors in the class. I love him, man. He's one of my favorite prospects in this class, but the floor is pretty low with him compared to Scoot, who I think has a decently high floor. So when I look at Scoot, I think he's somebody that has a high floor and is one of 3 players that has franchise player potential in this class. So that to me easily makes him number 2 on my board. And to end this video, I think it's fitting that I will bring this back to the original thing that made me think of doing this podcast style video. And that to me is the comparison between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson. I think that they both are great prospects. They are number 2 and 3 on my board, even if I think one is clearly better than the other. Both being top 3 are a sign of really good prospects. And I do think that they have similar floors. I think both of them are going to be good players. I don't think in the case of Scoot or Miller, barring injury obviously, and we don't wish injury on anyone, I don't think that either of them will be bad players. I just don't see that world. When you get both of their traits, they both have traits that suggest at the very least they will be solid. It would shock me if either of them flamed out of the league because of reasons that aren't related to injury. But at the same time, you compare the ceilings and it's really not close in my opinion. I think that Brandon Miller does have a high ceiling. I think he can be an all-star in this league. Somebody that I compare to Rashard Lewis, who's one of the most underrated players of his generation, and somebody that would be significantly better in modern basketball as this 6'10", 2-way perimeter star. That's what Rashard Lewis was. I think Brandon Miller can be that. But I also think Brandon Miller's ceiling to me is a number 2 or 3 on a team. I don't think that Miller has franchise player potential, at least franchise centerpiece potential. Because I do think there are concerns about the lack of the handle right now. His handle's really shaky. There are some finishing concerns with him as well. But his floor is really high because of his shooting ability, because of the defense. His passing's really good. But with Scoot, you just look at the traits and you say, this could be a superstar. And I think that, to me, separates them. The fact that I think Scoot has those superstar traits and Miller doesn't, really does. Again, that's not a diss on Miller. Miller's going to be a really good player in this league. I like him a lot. But Scoot Henderson just does things that make me believe he can be transcendent. And being transcendent usually gets you drafted number 1 in most years. But in years where there's a basketball alien that's at the top of the board because he's something we've never seen before, that to me is a sign that Scoot is number 2. who would be number 1 in most tiers. Again, if it wasn't for the NBA one and done rule, I think Scoot Henderson would be in Orlando right now and he'd be a Rookie of the Year frontrunner. That's how good he is. But yeah, that's the end of this video. I understand that it's a bit different than my usual videos. In fact, it's different than all my videos. There's no editing involved. It's just me talking with background music and B-roll footage of Scoot Henderson. So I understand that, yes, it's not like my usual videos. I do think that you guys should be excited about what I have in store, because I have a lot in store. I have a Derek Whitehead prospect breakdown video coming out soon. Jaylen Brown video is going to be in the works soon. March is almost over, means April's around the corner, which means you're going to get a new mock draft soon. Among other prospect videos I'm going to do. Playoff videos coming out soon when that starts. Award predictions, things like that. So, expect more work. But I just wanted to make this video in particular because, I just wanted to talk about it, obviously. But also because I think it's a good sort of relaxing video of just me giving my thoughts about something in between my usual projects that do take a lot of time for me to make. But yeah, that's all I had to do. All I had to say. I'm mixing up my words at the end here. But yeah, all I had to say. That's what I wanted to say. But anyways, have a nice day, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.